Hello again, I'm Maurice and I've got 10 minutes with you, so let's start the clock and we'll get cracking. Okay, I want to talk about Babylon, the city, the country, and about the king of Babylon. Last blog we looked at Egypt and Pharaoh. What do they signify? So this is part 2. The two-part series is called Egypt and Babylon. So who does the city or what does the city of Babylon represent, and the country, and who does the king of Babylon signify? Well, let's go right back to the first dynasty of Babylon. The first city of Babylon was built just after the flood by a man called Nimrod. We could say much about him, but it clearly tells us that he was the first king of Babylon. He built it. Okay, I can't say much about that. But many years later, when God called Israel, in the time of the kings of Israel, there was another empire. Babylon resurfaced again, and it was a world empire. When Israel served other gods, they wanted this world, its culture, its politics. They asked God's prophet Samuel for a king like other nations. And Samuel wasn't pleased because God wasn't pleased. Let me read 1 Samuel 8 verse 6. But this thing displeased Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." They were already heading for Babylon, because Babylon is the mixture, the confusion. Let me explain. Romans says when a person or a country doesn't want to retain God in their knowledge, he hands them over to the thinking of this world to suffer the consequences. Romans 1:28 says this, "And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient." And it says to suffer the consequences later. That's the world. That's people who are not Christians. If they don't want God in their knowledge, he hands them over. So my own country, England, is in that state. We've passed laws to say we don't want God's laws. We've passed laws to legitimise abortion, euthanasia, many things that don't please God. So he's handed us over to do those things to suffer the consequences. But God's people are different. When God's people want the world and its system and its culture and its fashion, then God doesn't hand them over to Egypt. He can't, because God redeemed us out of Egypt. Remember, Egypt is the world. So if he's redeemed us out of Egypt, to put us back into Egypt would to be lose our redemption. In other words, it would be to lose our salvation. God will never do that. Your salvation's secure. So what he does, he puts you into Babylon. And Babylon, the very word, means confusion, mixture. So there's a confusion now because we're God's people, but we're practicing the thinking of the world. So instead of the wife of God or the bride of Christ as it is now, we've got the whore of Babylon. The whore, not the virgin. So Babylon is the mixture. It's always the counterfeit church. Babylon is the religious. The one world system, the one world dictator, that's different. That's the beast. But the woman who rides the beast is Babylon. Babylon is the woman. So Babylon's the counterfeit church, the imposter, the polluted woman. But of course it looks exactly like the real. That's why it's an imposter. Revelation 18:18. God told John to come up and he'd show him things. And he says this, "And the woman which you saw," that's Babylon, "is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth." So it shows that this woman that he saw is Babylon, the city. This is what God said to the king of Babylon in Israel's time when he handed Israel to him. Daniel 2:37 and 38. He said, "You, O king, are a king of kings." Now let me stop there, because King of Kings is a title of Jesus. He's the only king of kings. So either God was saying to Nebuchadnezzar, "You're Jesus, you're a type of Jesus," or you're a type of the anti-Jesus, the antichrist, which is obvious when you read it. "For the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, a power, strength and glory." Let me stop there. The Lord's Prayer says yours is the kingdom, the power and the glory. So God's given the kingdom, the power and the glory, transferred them from Israel to Nebuchadnezzar, to the counterfeit, the mixture. And he says, wherever so the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field, the fowls of the heaven, is given to your hand, and is made you, Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler of them all. You're the head of gold. If you know Daniel, the statue, the head of gold, and then the shoulders of silver, and the thighs of brass, and the legs of iron, and then the feet of iron and clay. We're now in that. So we're in the legs and the feet of Rome. But actually, it's the statue of Babylon. It's the one statue, and Nebuchadnezzar is still the head, the brains, the thinking, the culture, the mindset of the whole statue. Well, who does the king of Babylon represent? Antichrist, the one who rules the counterfeit church. Well, the popes have always been Antichrist. In fact, on the Pope's headdress it says Vicarius Christi, in place of Christ. He's God's shepherd, he's God's representative on earth, not Christ. He's now Christ, the Antichrist, by his own admission. And all the denominations, the Protestant denominations, are daughters of Babylon. How can I say that? Well, every revival has been birthed in purity, whether it's the Baptists, the Methodists, the Pentecostals. They were always thrust out of the backslidden church, Babylon. The problem is that after 100 years, every one of them, without exception, has prostituted itself. My own denomination, Assemblies of God, started off wonderful, but now it's jobs for the boys, now it's about money, now it's about politics and how many churches we've got, and it's a business model now. It's prostituted itself, it's a daughter of Babylon, and every religion and every denomination are only daughters of Babylon after the birth and after the freshness. They always revert back. Revelation 16:5 says this about the whore of Babylon. Upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. So all the daughters are harlots as well, and abominations of the earth. Every one of the denominations has come out of Babylon, out of the Catholic Church. So I think I should mention here about Lucifer, because if I ask people who Lucifer is, they'll say Satan, but that's not biblical at all. There's only one scripture in the whole Bible that mentions Lucifer, and it shows that he's a man, not Satan. Satan's not a man. You have to read the context. You can't take two verses and say that fits Satan. The context clearly shows it's not. Let me read from Isaiah 14, verse 3 and 4, because this is the context. This is what the statement's about. Talking to Israel, and it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall give you rest from your sorrows, and from your fear, and from your hard bondage wherein you were made to serve. You shall take up this proverb. So the day that God restores Israel, when he reveals himself to them, they'll take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. They'll mock him and say, how has the golden oppressor ceased, the golden city? You made yourself God. Who are you? Have you fallen from heaven, Lucifer? It's a mock, but it's about the king of Babylon, and it calls the king of Babylon Lucifer. So Lucifer clearly is the king of Babylon. Now, if you think the king of Babylon represents Satan, okay. But I've proved last blog that Egypt represents, and Pharaoh represents Satan. I believe he represents the Antichrist, king of Babylon. There's two beasts rise out of the sea in Revelation, one out of the sea, one out of the earth. The first one is, I believe, the one world dictator, Satan personified. We haven't time to look at that. But the second beast, I believe, is the Antichrist, because it's a lamb. It looks like a lamb, horns like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. So it's Satan personified if you read the context. Revelation 17 verse 3 to 6. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit on a scarlet coloured beast, full of names of blasphemy, 7 heads and 10 horns. That shows it's Satan. And the woman was arrayed in purple, scarlet, gold, silver, precious stones and pearls. Okay, I want to look at the bride of Christ. Time's running out, so I must rush on. But let me look at the next scripture, the bride of Christ. Revelation 21. From 10 to 18. He carried me away again in the spirit and showed me holy Jerusalem coming down from heaven, like a stone most precious. The walls were of jasper, the city was gold, and the foundations of the walls were precious stones, and it gives them all. And the gates were pearls. So we can see that they're both beautiful, the bride of Christ, the whore of Babylon. Both got the attire of a pure lady. So I believe the modern church is Babylon because of the mixture of we've got half the doctrines of Babylon and half of the Bible. We've mixed the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. And God calls his people out of Babylon in the last days. Now, if God calls his people out of Babylon, he must expect them to be in it. Let me just read it. Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that you're not partaker of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. The time's gone now. Babylon speaks of the counterfeit church. The king of Babylon is Antichrist. I've written 5 books, 6,000 Years of Babylon. They're on the website, www.barrettministries.org.uk. Okay, I have to go. See you for the next vlog. God bless.